Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're diving headfirst into Adam Grant's Think Again, the power of knowing what you don't know.
hmm
Our entire exploration today comes directly from the pages of this really fascinating book.
Yeah, and our mission is pretty laser focused for you, the listener. We want to extract the most vital insights about, well, why rethinking our beliefs is so crucial,
Right.
and maybe how we can actually get better at it.
hmm
We know you're looking to gain knowledge quickly, thoroughly.
It's those surprising facts.
Exactly. Those aha moments without feeling, totally overwhelmed by dense information.
Okay, let's get right to it then. This idea of mental agility. Grant kicks things off talking about how we've traditionally thought about intelligence.
Yeah, like it's just about speed and learning efficiency.
But he adds this layer, this concept of mental fitness.
And what's fascinating here is that Grant argues, well, in today's world, it's not just about how fast you process things.
Mhm.
Think of mental fitness as like the flexibility of your thinking muscles. Just like physical fitness lets you adapt to physical stuff. Mental fitness lets you adapt to new information, revise your opinions, navigate all that uncertainty. It's really about how agile your mind is.
And he immediately grabs your attention with that story, the intense one about Wagner Dodge and the Man Gulch fire.
Oh, yeah.
For anyone unfamiliar, it was this devastating wildfire. A team of smoke jumpers got caught, tragically.
Right.
Dodge was one of the few survivors, and here's where it gets really interesting. It wasn't just luck.
No, precisely. I mean, physical endurance helped the other survivors a bit, sure, but Dodge's survival was fundamentally about his mental fitness. Right there in that extreme moment.
Under immense pressure.
Immense pressure. He broke free from their ingrained protocol, this assumption they had to drop their heavy tools and just, try to outrun the fire.
Which sounds logical initially.
It does. But he had the clarity of mind to light a counterfire, a move that must have seemed completely illogical, maybe even insane, to his crew right then.
But it worked.
It created the safe zone that saved him.
It's such a chilling example, isn't it? 12 experienced professionals lost their lives because they couldn't rethink their deeply ingrained assumptions fast enough. They just clung to what they knew, what they were trained for.
Even when the situation was screaming for something totally different, a radical shift.
So this raises a powerful question for you listening. How often do you encounter situations, maybe not life or death, thankfully, but still significant,
Right.
where holding on to familiar assumptions might be limiting you, limiting your ability to be really well-informed, adaptable?
Yeah, think about prepping for a presentation or trying to grasp a new trend in your field. Are you consciously open to rethinking your first take as you learn more? Or do you just kind of lock in?
Exactly. And that leads us right into this idea that our knowledge, our assumptions, our opinions, they're like cognitive tools we carry around.
Some useful.
Some useful, maybe others less so. And Grant includes this really insightful visual, a pie chart he calls tools we cling to.
And what immediately jumps out from that chart is just how much of our thinking is dominated by assumptions, instincts, habits.
Yeah, it dwarfs the space for actual open-minded evaluation.
It's a pretty stark visual reminder, isn't it? How much of our mental processing is just running on autopilot,
Yeah.
driven by these pre-existing frameworks instead of active thought.
And then he shares this fascinating story about the Harvard students, the ones who built an early social network. This was way before Facebook.
Right, they had this incredible first mover advantage, but they they fumbled it.
Yeah, they did.
They seem to be operating under this really limiting assumption that an online social network was basically just a college fad.
They didn't see the bigger picture.
No, they didn't recognize its potential to fundamentally change how people connect. Their initial vision was just too constrained, maybe by the tech back then too, but mostly by those assumptions. It stopped them scaling it.
It's a huge missed opportunity.
A powerful lesson in how tightly held initial ideas can just blind us to much larger possibilities down the road.
It's really interesting to contrast that with Grant's own journey, though. He talks about how rethinking became this core principle for him. He's a psychologist, right? Deals in human behavior. Yet he actively challenges even the foundational ideas in his own field.
And that highlights a crucial point. Embracing rethinking isn't about tossing out everything you've learned.
No.
It's more about holding your knowledge a bit more lightly, maintaining a willingness to examine even your deepest beliefs. It's a shift in perspective, really,
From seeing yourself as someone who has beliefs.
to someone who's in the process of understanding. It's subtle, but important.
Now, he introduces these different modes we often operate in. This is really helpful. The preacher, the prosecutor, the politician, and the scientist.
Absolutely. They're really insightful archetypes. The preacher mode, that's about defending your sacred beliefs like they define you.
Mm-hmm.
The prosecutor mode is all about proving others wrong, actively seeking flaws in their arguments.
We all know people like that.
Oh, yeah. And the politician mode is about winning approval, right? Often shifting your stance depending on the audience.
Okay, and then there's the scientist mode, which he really champions. What's the key difference there? How does someone in that mode approach being wrong?
The scientist mode is fundamentally different. It's driven by a quest for evidence. And crucially, it actively seeks out evidence that might contradict your current understanding.
So you're looking for ways you might be wrong.
Exactly. You form hypotheses, then you rigorously test them. In this mode, being wrong isn't failure. It's actually valuable data.
Ah,
It brings you closer to a more accurate understanding. So the key insight here is to consciously try to adopt this scientist mode, actively stress testing your own beliefs whenever you face new info or big decisions.
so what does this mean for you, our listener, if you're looking for those aha moments, wanting multiple angles?
Well, if we connect this back, deliberately engaging in that scientist mode directly fuels your intellectual growth. By actively seeking out different, to revise your views based on what you learn. That's how you open yourself up to those aha moments,
Yeah.
those shifts in understanding that come from challenging yourself.
It's about cultivating that mindset of continuous learning.
And intellectual humility, yeah.
He then lays out these really clear contrasting cycles. The rethinking cycle versus the overconfidence cycle.
Yeah.
Powerful visual.
They really are. The rethinking cycle is that positive feedback loop. Humility leads to questioning, which is doubt, which sparks curiosity, leading to discovery, which then reinforces humility because you realize how much you don't know.
And the other one, the overconfidence cycle.
That's the trap. Pride in what you think you know solidifies your convictions,
Okay.
leading you to seek only validating information, which then inflates your pride even more and just closes you off.
And that sets the stage perfectly for the Dunning-Kruger effect discussion, doesn't it?
It really does.
The idea that the less competent people are in an area, the more confident they often are.
What's so telling about Dunning-Kruger is how it perfectly illustrates the danger of that overconfidence cycle. When we lack the skills or knowledge,
Yeah.
we also lack the ability to accurately assess our own incompetence. We just don't know what we don't know.
Which leads to that unwarranted certainty.
Exactly.
He throws in some really surprising examples, too, just to highlight how much we might not know, even about seemingly basic stuff.
Like whether the U.S. has an official language.
Right. Or seeing the Great Wall from space. Spoiler, you can't.
These examples are just a humbling reminder, aren't they? What we think we know can often be way off. As Dunning himself quipped, the first rule of the Dunning-Kruger Club is you don't know you're a member.
Good one.
It makes you wonder, right? In what areas might we be unknowingly overconfident?
Definitely food for thought. And then there's that cautionary tale of David Oddsson, the Icelandic central bank governor.
Oh, yeah.
That's a pretty vivid illustration of someone, as Grant puts it, stranded at the summit of Mount Stupid.
Absolutely. I mean, despite lacking formal economic expertise, he held this incredibly influential position
Right.
and seemed totally unaware of his limitations, especially leading up to the 2008 financial crisis. It's just a stark example of the potential consequences of overconfidence, especially in high-stakes situations.
But Grant makes a really important distinction here. Being confident in your ability to achieve a goal that can coexist with humility about your current knowledge.
Yes, that's a crucial nuance. It's not about being perpetually insecure.
No.
You can be confident in your capacity to learn, to adapt, confident in your resilience, while still maintaining humility about what you currently know and being open to revising your strategies. That's the healthy balance.
And on the flip side, he talks about the unexpected benefits of sometimes feeling like an imposter, which sounds bad.
It sounds counterintuitive, right? But that feeling can actually be a surprisingly powerful motivator.
How so?
It often fosters what's called a beginner's mindset. Makes you more willing to question assumptions, actively seek out new information,
Okay, I see.
and it can make you a better learner because you recognize you have things to learn, prompting you to seek insights from others.
He shares the story of Halla Tómasdóttir's approach during Iceland's presidential election, where she openly admitted she didn't have all the answers.
And Halla's willingness to be vulnerable, to seek advice publicly, even while campaigning for the highest office, That really resonated with voters.
It showed a different kind of confidence.
Exactly. Confidence in her ability to learn and grow rather than projecting this image of already knowing everything.
Which leads us to this idea, maybe a bit counterintuitive, of finding the joy of being wrong.
Yeah, most of us probably don't naturally connect those two things.
No. Our natural tendency is often to fiercely protect our beliefs.
Mm.
Grant calls it the totalitarian ego.
It's a great phrase. This inner drive to control information flow and just reinforce what we already think.
But then he shares this wonderful anecdote about the scientist Danny Kahneman, Nobel Prize winner, who actually enjoys discovering he's wrong.
That's such a radical shift in perspective, isn't it?
Totally. What's so inspiring about Kahneman's view is that he sees being wrong as the clearest signal that he's actually learned something new. It's a complete flip.
From mistakes as failures?
To mistakes as invaluable opportunities for intellectual growth.
And Grant even shares his own experiences, right? His research hypotheses being proven wrong.
Yeah, and the surprising excitement that followed. For a true scientist, the pursuit of truth ultimately outweighs the desire to be right.
So discovering an error isn't a setback.
It's a course correction, and it highlights this broader human tendency. We're often quick to form conclusions, but surprisingly resistant to revising them, even with compelling new evidence.
Okay, so how do we actually cultivate this rethinking mindset in our own lives? What are some practical steps we can take?
Well, Grant points to the habits of super forecasters. You know, those individuals with exceptional track records in making accurate predictions.
What do they do differently? A key characteristic is a real eagerness to rethink their positions. As Jeff Bezos famously said, people who are right a lot listen a lot, and they change their mind a lot.
Listen a lot, change their mind a lot. Okay.
Mm-hmm. And there's this really clever trick from Jean-Pierre Bougom's about predefining the specific conditions under which he'd change his mind.
Oh, that sounds incredibly proactive, like setting tripwires for your own beliefs.
It's a powerful accountability mechanism, really. By setting those clear criteria in advance, you got to prevent yourself from getting too emotionally attached to a forecast or belief.
Makes it easier to accept when it's time to rethink.
Exactly.
And then he shares that truly inspiring story of the physicist Andrew Lyne, admitting a major astronomical error.
And getting a standing ovation from his peers.
Yeah. That's not the reaction most of us would expect when admitting we messed up, is it?
Not at all. It's a remarkable testament to the high value placed on intellectual honesty and humility within the scientific community.
So admitting you're wrong can actually enhance your reputation.
In the right context, absolutely. Lyne's willingness to publicly own his mistake in front of colleagues was seen as an act of great integrity. It earned respect.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit. We often think of conflict as negative, something to avoid. But Grant digs into the power of constructive conflict, particularly the crucial distinction between task conflict and relationship conflict.
This is such a vital distinction. Relationship conflict is that personal, emotional stuff. It can be so damaging.
Right. Attacks, resentment.
Exactly. Task conflict, though, is focused on the issues. Debating ideas, challenging assumptions, focusing on the substance of the problem.
And the research shows task conflicts can actually be good.
Yeah, interestingly, research shows a task conflict, when managed well, can be a significant driver of creativity, innovation, and ultimately better decisions.
He brings this to life with the Wright brothers example. Apparently they argued a lot.
Intensely. But their frequent, intense arguments weren't about personal animosity. No, it was deep engagement with the huge challenges of inventing the airplane. They had the courage to fiercely debate ideas and the resilience to disagree without taking it personally. It was task conflict at its best, focused on the problem, no hostility.
And he suggests framing disagreements as debates rather than just disagreements. How does that subtle shift in language help?
Well, framing it as a debate signals something more intellectual, less personal.
Okay.
It suggests you're open to considering different perspectives, maybe even changing your own mind based on the arguments. Disagreement can feel more adversarial, more entrenched.
And that idea that in a great argument, your adversary can be a propeller.
Yeah, I love that. A propeller for better thinking. They can push you to refine your own ideas, consider angles you missed.
So we've spent a lot of time on rethinking our own views. Now the book shifts focus to something often even trickier, how we can actually open other people's minds. He talks about moving from prosecuting to dancing in arguments. What does that look like?
Moving from prosecuting to dancing. It's a fundamental shift. Instead of trying to win by proving the other person wrong that's prosecuting,
Right.
You adopt a more collaborative, empathetic approach. That's the dancing. It involves finding common ground, showing humility, genuine curiosity about their perspective.
Inviting them to explore the issue with you.
Exactly. Like a scientist alongside you, not against you.
He shares insights from this expert negotiator, Harish Natarajan, emphasizing finding that initial common ground.
Yeah, Natarajan's approach really underscores the power of starting by identifying areas of agreement, shared values, common goals, before hitting the points of contention.
It disarms people.
Totally. Makes them more receptive. Build that connection first.
And what about the quality versus quantity of reasons we offer? Our instinct might be to just pile on arguments.
Yeah, but interestingly, Grant points out that with skeptical people, or stubborn ones, or people with strong emotions tied up in it, just throwing more reasons at them can actually backfire. It gives them more targets to shoot down, more chances to dig in.
Ah, so less can be more.
In those situations, yes. The quality, thoughtfulness, relevance of your reasons matters way more than the sheer number.
And the source of the info is also critical, isn't it? Like, who is delivering the message?
Absolutely critical. People are often much more likely to be influenced by someone they trust, identify with, someone from their own community.
Right, like a respected local figure versus some distant expert.
Exactly. The messenger matters.
He even shares a personal anecdote about him devolving into name-calling in a disagreement.
Yeah.
It's a good reminder that even experts fall into these traps.
It really underscores the importance of self-awareness in those heated moments. Recognizing when you're getting defensive or resorting to bad tactics. That's the first step.
To sidestep the hostility?
Yeah, and steer it back. Maybe even, like he suggests, have a conversation about the conversation itself. A meta step back.
Okay, empathy feels so fundamental here. Grant shares that incredible story of Daryl Davis.
Oh, amazing story.
A black musician who persuaded KKK members to leave the Klan. How did he even begin to do that?
His approach was just remarkable. No anger, no confrontation. He operated from genuine curiosity.
He's asking questions.
Yeah, basically asking, how can you hate me when you don't even know me? By having respectful conversations, actively listening even to views we find abhorrent, seeking to understand their reasoning.
He built bridges.
He built bridges and fundamentally challenged their deeply entrenched hate. It's extraordinary.
And Grant also talks about his experiments with Yankees and Red Sox fans, those intense rivals.
Yeah, trying to reduce their animosity. Exploring techniques like highlighting the arbitrary nature of the rivalry.
Like you just happen to be born there.
Right. Encouraging that counterfactual thinking. What if you'd been born in New York instead of Boston? Trying to destabilize those strong us versus them feelings.
But he does offer a word of caution, right? About just relying on perspective taking. We're often bad at guessing what others think.
That's a really important point. Trying to understand is valuable, yes. But just imagining their perspective often leads to inaccurate assumptions.
So it's better.
Perspective seeking, actively engaging, asking open-ended questions, really listening to understand their reasoning, not just projecting our own ideas onto them.
Which leads us nicely into the art of listening itself. He introduces motivational interviewing principles.
Yeah, it sounds like a very intentional, effective approach.
What does it involve?
It really emphasizes empathy, asking open-ended questions to draw the other person out, reflective listening to make sure you've understood correctly, and summarizing their points to show you're paying attention. It's about guiding someone towards their own reasons for considering a change, not imposing yours.
He shares the story of Arnaud Gagneur, the vaccine whisperer.
Right. Who had significant success with parents concerned about vaccines.
And it wasn't just about throwing data at them.
Not at all. His success came from building trust, actively listening to their specific fears without judgment, and then addressing those individual concerns respectfully. It was real dialogue, not a lecture.
And he discusses the power of complexifying issues, presenting multiple perspectives, acknowledging nuance.
Instead of just black and white thinking.
Right. How does that help people rethink?
Well, when you present multiple facets, acknowledge valid points on different sides, it signals intellectual honesty. It can make people much more receptive to viewpoints different from their own.
It's the opposite of binary thinking, which just entrenches beliefs.
Exactly. And that experiment he describes is amazing, where a nuanced article on gun control actually influenced views on abortion.
Wow. Shows how connected things are.
And how complexifying one area can open the door to rethinking others.
He even makes the point that admitting uncertainties can increase credibility. That seems counterintuitive.
It does. But admitting you don't have all the answers, or that there's genuine uncertainty, it can actually make you seem more trustworthy and knowledgeable.
Because you're not oversimplifying.
Right. You show you've engaged deeply enough to see the complexities.
Okay, now the book turns towards rethinking education and even our career paths. He uses the flat earth overconfidence cycle as a striking example.
Yeah, it's a powerful, if extreme, illustration of how false beliefs combined with confirmation bias
Seeking only supporting info.
and social reinforcement from like-minded groups can create this incredibly hard-to-break cycle of overconfidence.
And he highlights how traditional lectures often aren't very effective at debunking misconceptions or encouraging rethinking.
Right. Lectures are often passive. They don't usually allow for the dialogue, questioning, disagreement, all the stuff needed to really challenge and shift beliefs.
Students become passive recipients.
Instead of active critical thinkers. Yeah.
He mentions Robert Nozick's teaching philosophy, constantly exploring totally new topics himself.
Nozick believed that was the best way to learn and keep your own thinking sharp. Grappling with unfamiliar subjects constantly challenges your assumptions, prevents stagnation.
And there's that surprising finding. Highly creative students often have B averages.
Yeah, what might be behind that? It suggests creative people might be more willing to take intellectual risks, explore unconventional ideas, maybe be wrong sometimes.
Qualities essential for creativity.
But maybe not always aligned with getting top grades in systems that reward the single right answer. Straight A students might be more focused on conforming.
Interesting. He introduces Ron Berger's emphasis on revision and critique sessions in the classroom.
Well, Berger's approach sounds brilliant. Creating a challenge network in class where students learn to give and receive constructive feedback.
Seeing work as a process.
Exactly. An ongoing refinement, not a final product. It normalizes making mistakes and learning from them.
And moving into teams, professional settings, psychological safety seems crucial.
Absolutely vital. That feeling you can speak up, ask questions, admit mistakes without fear. It's foundational for team learning, innovation, problem solving.
And leaders play a big role.
Huge role. Modeling openness, asking for feedback, encouraging diverse perspectives.
He also warns about escalation of commitment, that dark side of grit.
When perseverance keeps us stuck on a failing strategy just because we've already invested so much.
Sunk cost fallacy.
Pretty much. Grit's good, but it can be a liability if it stops us rethinking. We need to know when to pivot, cut losses, not let past effort cloud future judgment.
And for career choices, he talks about identity foreclosure, the danger of locking in too early.
Yeah, and the limits of that question. What do you want to be when you grow up?
It frames it as a fixed thing.
Exactly. Locking into a fixed identity too early limits exploration, makes it harder to adapt later. Viewing careers as actions, experiences, rather than static labels. That's much more adaptable.
He advocates for regular identity checkups in life.
Sounds like a really valuable practice. Regularly revisiting assumptions and beliefs about our careers, relationships, other key areas.
Making sure they still align.
Yeah, with who we are now and our circumstances. It makes rethinking continuous, intentional, not just reactive when things break.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into Think Again, what's the biggest takeaway for our listeners?
I think the overarching message is that rethinking, it isn't weakness. It's a really valuable skill, an ongoing process. It means consciously cultivating that scientist mode more often.
Being willing to question assumptions.
Seek out disconfirming evidence, revise beliefs based on new info.
Yeah, absolutely. It's about embracing that cycle. Humility, doubt, curiosity, discovery, and maybe even finding a little joy in being wrong.
Because it means you learn something. You move closer to a more accurate understanding. And perhaps you, our listener, might take a moment today. Just consider one area where you've held a long-standing assumption or belief.
Maybe it's time for a fresh look.
Yeah. Approach it with a bit of curiosity, a willingness to think again.
That's a great thought to leave us with. And on that note, here's one final provocative idea for you to consider. What if what I believe isn't a final destination, but rather an ongoing journey? A continuous process of learning and evolution. Thanks so much for joining us on this deep dive.